Number 10. The clock that counts down. Lena found the pocket watch at a flea market, buried in a pile of forgotten trinkets. The old man selling it smiled when she picked it up. "Strange thing, isn't it?" he said. "It only counts down." She turned it over in her hands. There was no traditional clock face, just a single hand ticking down from 10 minutes. "How do I reset it?" she asked. The old man's smile faltered. "You don't." Lena laughed, thinking it was just a broken gimmick. She bought it anyway. The moment she left the flea market, the hand moved. 9:59. 9:58. Her stomach twisted. It was actually counting down. She shook it, pressed the buttons. Nothing stopped it. When it reached 00:00, the world flickered, like a glitch. The street she stood on reset. The people walking by repeated their motions exactly as they had a moment ago. She gasped, watching as the watch reset itself. 59. 9:58. She tried testing it. She dropped her coffee, then watched in horror as the world flickered again, and she was holding it once more. Every time the watch hit 0, time reset by 1 minute. And then, one day, the numbers started decreasing faster. Minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. Panic clawed at her throat. What would happen when it reached 0 and didn't reset? She held her breath as the watch ticked down its final seconds. 03, 002, 001. Then everything went dark. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to see more content like this each week. Number 9. The man who was never here. A man wakes up in a hospital bed, head pounding, surrounded by unfamiliar faces. A nurse enters with a clipboard and a cautious smile. "Sir, you were in an accident. Can you tell me your name?" His mind is blank. He reaches for his phone, but there are no contacts, no messages. He checks his ID. It's blank. The doctor tells him he was found unconscious on the side of the road, with nothing but his phone and wallet. Determined to find out who he is, he follows the address on his driver's license. The house is familiar. He knocks on the door, and a man opens it. A man who looks exactly like him. The other man tilts his head, a slow, knowing grin spreading across his face. "You're not supposed to be here," the man says. "You died in that accident, but you forgot to stay dead." The world around him begins to shift. The sky darkens. The ground beneath his feet sways. He stumbles backward, his vision blurring. He looks at his hands. They are becoming translucent. The other man steps forward, voice calm but final. "You're a mistake, an echo, a shadow that shouldn't exist." The man tries to scream, but his voice is gone. The world collapses into darkness, and he feels himself unraveling, like a memory being erased. Then silence. Number 8. The town that doesn't exist. A woman is driving through the mountains when a storm forces her to take a detour. The GPS directs her to a town she's never heard of, Ashwood. She pulls in, shivering from the cold, and notices something strange. The streets are lined with homes, but they look off. Too perfect, like a film set frozen in time. A gas station attendant greets her by name. So does the waitress at the diner. Even the old woman at the motel smiles knowingly. "Welcome home, dear." She shakes her head. "No, I'm just passing through." The woman's smile falters. Her voice drops to a whisper. "Nobody passes through Ashwood. You were born here, and no one ever leaves." The storm grows stronger. Her car won't start. Her phone has no signal. She runs to the police station, but the officer just looks at her with tired, empty eyes. "If you remember another life," he says softly, "then you must have left before, but something brought you back." The townspeople begin to gather outside. Their eyes gleam in the dim streetlights. A child tugs at her sleeve. "If you try to leave again, he whispers. "You'll disappear, like the others." She backs away, heart hammering. The streetlights flicker. The world warps, twisting like a dream collapsing. The people blink out of existence one by one. The buildings fade into dust. And then she wakes up, in the car, driving. The storm has cleared. The GPS reroutes. Ashwood does not exist. She exhales in relief until she looks at the rearview mirror. The town is still there, and the people are watching her leave. Number 7, the room with no exit. A businessman checks into a hotel after a long flight. Room 306. He showers, changes, and reaches for the door to grab ice from the hallway. But when he opens it, he doesn't find the corridor, just another identical hotel room. Confused, he turns back, but the room behind him is gone. The bed is made again. The suitcase is gone. The TV turns on by itself, displaying security footage of himself. Standing in the room. He moves closer to the screen. The footage zooms in. From behind him, a note appears on the nightstand. "You should have knocked first." His breathing quickens. He opens the bathroom door, hoping for another exit. But inside, it's not a bathroom at all. It's the same hotel room, just reversed. He sees himself standing by the nightstand, watching the TV. And then his reflection turns its head and looks directly at him. The lights flicker. The air feels thick, suffocating. He dashes for the window and yanks it open, but there's nothing outside. No city, no sky, just endless, swirling darkness. A whisper brushes against his ear. "You were never a guest." The hotel phone rings. He hesitates, then picks it up. A voice, distant and hollow, says one word. "Welcome, number 6, the mirror that shows tomorrow." Moving through the abandoned house, Clara wiped the dust from her hands as she carefully stepped over the rotting floorboards. The house had been empty for decades, but something about it felt alive. She could swear she heard faint creaks and whispers, like something breathing beneath the walls. In the attic, she found an old, ornate mirror. Its frame was covered in intricate carvings of twisting vines and staring eyes. The glass was grimy, clouded over with years of dust and neglect. She wiped it clean with her sleeve, expecting to see her own face staring back. But something was off. Her reflection moved a second too late. Clara blinked. It mimicked her, but the delay was undeniable. She lifted her hand, and the reflection hesitated before doing the same. A slow shiver crawled up her spine. She stepped closer. The mirror showed the room behind her, dim, untouched. But then, something moved. A flicker of motion, just out of place. A shadow shifted in the background. Clara spun around, her pulse pounding. Nothing was there, just dusty furniture and peeling wallpaper. Her eyes flicked back to the mirror. Her reflection was no longer looking at her. It was staring past her, eyes wide with terror. Its lips trembled as it shakily lifted a hand and pointed. Clara's breath hitched. Then the reflection's mouth moved, writing something in the condensation forming on the glass. "Tomorrow, you die." Her body locked in place. Ice shot through her veins. She forced herself to turn, to check behind her one more time. The attic was empty. The house was silent. A nervous laugh bubbled in her throat. It had to be her imagination. A trick of the dust, an overactive mind. But the next morning, her alarm clock didn't go off. She woke up disoriented, exhausted, her heart hammering for no reason. Something was wrong. She felt it in her bones. As she shuffled toward the bathroom, she caught sight of herself in the mirror above the sink. And then, she watched as her reflection slumped forward, a deep, red gash appearing across its throat. Blood splattered the glass. Clara screamed, scrambling backward. But in the real world, there was no wound, no blood, nothing. She turned and ran, out of the house, down the street. She needed help. A doctor. Someone. Anyone. She reached her phone, breathless, fumbling to dial. But as she did, the screen flashed, her front-facing camera activating for no reason. She saw herself in the reflection, and behind her, a dark, grinning figure was already reaching for her. Number 5. The man who answered the wrong call. James was sitting at his desk late at night, scrolling through his phone when it rang. The screen displayed "unknown caller" in bold white text. He hesitated. Who calls at this hour? Against his better judgment, he answered. A robotic voice, distant and monotone, whispered, "You have made a mistake. Do not turn around." A chill ran down his spine. His heart pounded. He forced out a shaky breath. "Who is this?" he demanded. Silence. Then, breathing, slow, deep, right behind him. His body froze. He could feel something, someone, standing just inches from his back. The air had changed, thick and heavy. His mind screamed at him, "Do not turn around." With his fingers trembling, he gripped the phone tighter. "This isn't funny," he whispered. The voice on the other end chuckled, low, distorted. Then it said something new. "You were never supposed to answer." James couldn't breathe. He clenched his jaw, resisting the overwhelming urge to turn and look. The presence behind him was unbearable, pressing down on him, surrounding him. His phone vibrated violently. A message appeared on the screen. "Look outside." His pulse thundered in his ears. Slowly, carefully, he moved toward the window, never turning his back. The night outside was eerily still. His street was empty, except for a single flickering street lamp. And under that street lamp stood a figure. It was a tall, lanky shadow, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. It was looking directly at him. James gasped and stumbled back. The phone slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor. The call ended abruptly. Then, 3 loud knocks on his front door. His blood turned to ice. He barely managed to whisper, "No." The knocks came again. And then, his phone screen lit up. Another message. "Don't open the door, but whatever you do, don't let it in." James backed away, his entire body shaking. The air around him grew colder. The doorknob rattled. Then the voice on the phone spoke one last time. Too late. The lights flickered. The room plunged into darkness, and something breathed in his ear. Number 4. The house that wasn't there yesterday. Ethan had lived in the same neighborhood for 10 years, and he knew every house on his street, or at least he thought he did. One evening, as he walked home from work, he noticed a house that hadn't been there before. A tall, Victorian-style home, its windows dark, its roof jagged and sloping like something out of a nightmare. He stopped in his tracks, staring at it. How had he never seen it before? His neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, was outside tending to her roses. He walked up to her, pointing at the house. "Mrs. Holloway, did someone just move in?" She frowned at him. "What do you mean? That house has always been there." A chill crept up Ethan's spine. No, it hadn't. He was sure of it. That night, as he lay in bed, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Around midnight, his doorbell rang. He crept to the peephole. A child stood on his doorstep, barefoot, staring up at the door. Her hair was tangled, and her dress was old-fashioned, torn at the edges. She whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "You shouldn't have noticed it. Now it knows you exist." Ethan's stomach dropped. The doorbell rang again, this time more insistent. His phone buzzed. A new message. Don't open the door, but don't look away. His blood ran cold. He backed away slowly, keeping his eyes on the peephole. The child didn't move. Then, the porch light flickered, and she was gone. Ethan barely slept that night. When morning came, he rushed outside. He had to know. The house was gone. Just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. Number 3, the stranger in every photo. Aaron had always been sentimental about his childhood, keeping stacks of old photo albums filled with memories. One rainy afternoon, he decided to take a trip down memory lane, flipping through pages filled with birthday parties, family vacations, and school events. That's when he saw it. In every single picture, there was a man standing in the background. Tall, thin, wearing a dark coat. His face was always blurred, always distant, but unmistakably there. Even in baby pictures, he loomed somewhere in the background. Aaron's skin prickled. He had never noticed this man before. Had his parents hired a photographer? He called his mother immediately. "Mom, who is this man in my pictures?" Her voice went quiet. "What man?" He sent her a photo. Minutes passed. Then his phone rang again. His mother's voice was shaky. "There's no one there, Aaron." His stomach dropped. He looked at the photo again. The man was still there. Panicked, he searched through every album, scanning each image. The man was always there, sometimes in crowds, sometimes standing alone in doorways, always watching. Aaron's heart pounded. He reached for his phone to take a picture of the album itself, to prove he wasn't seeing things. But when he lifted his camera, the man wasn't in the photo anymore. A floorboard creaked behind him. Aaron spun around, his breath caught in his throat. The man was standing in the room with him. Number 2, the people who spoke in reverse. Daniel arrived in the small, isolated town just as the sun dipped below the horizon. It was meant to be a quick stop on his cross-country road trip, but from the moment he stepped out of his car, something felt wrong. The air was thick with an eerie stillness. The streets were empty, yet he could feel unseen eyes watching him. He walked into the town's only diner, where the few customers inside turned to stare at him. "Evening," he said awkwardly, taking a seat at the counter. The waitress approached, her expression blank. When she spoke, the words sent a chill down his spine. "Suot eva nak uoi, smargot ruoi stiu pu ktsip liu e." Daniel blinked. Had he misheard? It sounded like gibberish, but something about it gnawed at his mind. The others in the diner watched him expectantly, their lips moving in strange, reversed patterns. Shaken, he pulled out his phone and recorded them speaking. When he played it back, his stomach dropped. Reversed. The waitress's words were clear. "You can have out. I will pick up with your grams." The people weren't speaking nonsense. They were talking in reverse. Heart pounding, Daniel backed away. The customers stood in unison, their faces devoid of emotion. He bolted from the diner, running to his car. He locked the doors, his hands trembling as he turned the key. His phone buzzed. A new notification. A video. He clicked play. It was him, running to his car, eyes wide with terror, but the footage was playing in reverse. And at the very end, before the video cut out, he saw them. The townspeople, standing in a perfect circle around his car, smiling. Then his headlights flickered, and the engine died. Number 1, the last door on the train. Every night, Kevin took the last train home. And every night, he noticed the same thing. One door never opened. No matter how crowded the train was, no one ever stood near it. The passengers instinctively kept their distance. The door was covered in scratches, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. One evening, curiosity got the better of him. As the train sped through the tunnels, Kevin inched closer to the door. He reached out and with trembling fingers pried it open. The train car beyond was empty. The air inside was ice cold. A single note lay on one of the seats. "You weren't supposed to see this. Now you can't leave." Kevin's pulse pounded. He turned back, but the door was gone. The train car he had stepped from was no longer there. Just endless rows of seats, stretching far beyond what the train should have held. His phone had no signal. The train never stopped. Hours passed, maybe days. Then he saw them. Figures sitting in the seats, unmoving, watching, their eyes black and hollow. Kevin tried the doors. They wouldn't budge. Then he heard a whisper, low, insidious. "Sit down." The train kept moving. The passengers never blinked. And Kevin knew. He would never get off this train. And there you have it. 10 short stories that will haunt your mind long after the video ends. Which one sent chills down your spine? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're brave enough to hear more, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you never miss another eerie tale. But be careful. Some stories have a way of following you long after they're told. Sleep well if you can.